Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you're tuning in, thank you for stopping by. This is the Martal Group Fireside Chats, where each week we sit down with an industry expert and get their unique perspective on the world through the lens that we all know as sales and marketing. Today we sit down with the managing partner at Gulfstream Mergers and Acquisitions, Neil Boyles. Now, when you think mergers and acquisitions, typically you think of an environment that's very pushy, maybe predatory, overly salesy, but Neil and his team at Gulfstream take an entirely different approach. Have a listen.
A lot of it is just how do you treat other people? How do you talk to other people? At the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Yep.
And we're all here for a short time. And it's really, if you treat everybody right, and that's one of the oldest sayings, and it's really true. It'll all come back to you if you do it correctly.
Now, the conversations we're about to get into take a little bit of a deep dive into M&A, but also kind of go back to basics. Without further ado, let's hop right on into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Martal Group Fireside Chats. We're so happy that you're back here and joining us again for yet another exciting conversation. I feel like they're always all exciting. I know I say that every single time, but I'm biased and I'm going to continue to say that. Today we have a special guest. I'm excited to welcome in Neil Boyles from Gulfstream. He's one of the partners over at Gulfstream, focuses on mergers and acquisitions. I won't get too far ahead of myself. I'll let Neil kind of speak for himself. But before we dive into that, Neil, welcome. So good to have you here.
Oh, Chris, thank you for having us.
Yeah, excited to kind of dig into this, learn a little bit more, get your expertise on and your thought process and how you're handling the space, especially in today's market. I think that's a really big thing. I'm sure you guys are staying pretty busy. But before we dive into some of those questions, Neil, I'd love if you've given an introduction to yourself, kind of who you are, what you do within Gulfstream as a partner, a little bit about yourself here. Just, that way we get a chance to understand who it is we get to hear from today.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Neil Boyles of Gulfstream Mergers and Acquisitions. I'm based out of our Charlotte, North Carolina office, which is our headquarters. One of the partners here, actually managing partner here. The majority of my job is starting up new markets. So like when we started up Philadelphia, when we started up Nashville, and we've just opened a new Dallas office, the majority of my time is to go out to work the new offices, to help make sure everything's staffed and complete and running those in, and to really make sure that we're up and running those markets. We started out, I guess it's been 33 years now since we first started. Actually started in California. And long story short, the founder, Jim Niffen, decided to move the company because he had grandkids. And what happened, long story short, is he was like, listen, I've got too many kids. I don't want to raise them here in LA. It's kind of crazy for, to raise a family here. So he moved his whole family from the West Coast to the East Coast, because in our profession, we just need to be near an airport. So that's the main. And we decided on Charlotte, which is the second largest banking center on the East Coast. And we've been here, I guess, going on 10 to 12 years here in this market. And since then, we've grown again from Charlotte to, I think, Philadelphia, Miami, Atlanta, Nashville, Dallas. And so we handle clients all over the world. We've completed a couple of deals with clients out of Europe, South America.
Wow. The
majority of our clients are in the United States, and about 40% of our buyers are from outside the U.S. So we do a lot of cross-border deals also.
Gotcha.
So we are a true middle market M&A firm. And when I say that, I mean, we're full service. We do everything from the vetting to the beginning to all the marketing, everything up until the APA signed, we're involved in. So that's a little long-winded answer, but that's who we are and who we are a little bit. My background, I don't know how I got into this. Honestly, I've got English letters, I don't know kind of how I got into this.
Just kind of fell in, right?
Yeah. Literally, I have a letters in fine arts degree from High Point University, all that. And what happened was, like most of us in life, I was just at the right place at the right time, working a part-time job after baseball fell apart. And this lady kept saying, listen, I really want you to meet my husband. And he had a private equity group. And she kept talking to him, and I was like, well, I don't know anything about private equity. Well, I'm an English degree. I barely got him. And I met him. I was lucky. He took me under his wing, worked for him for about 10 years. Honestly, if he hadn't had brain cancer and passed away, I'd probably still been with him. But he taught me a lot. And from there, my career's kind of grown into this. Got into mergers and acquisitions because I really got tired of being in so many different teams. And you've probably been through this, where a company's bought and sold. And, you're kind of in the wings on it. And finally, at one point, I was in Mexico City. We'd just been sold. And I was like, I want to get into something where I'm actually doing the selling.
Yeah.
And I know enough about it. And just so happened, a large company out of Europe was hiring for a director in North America. I interviewed, took a position, and I've been in M&A ever since, probably about 12 years in mergers and acquisitions now. And I've been with Jim and these guys about 7 years.
Wow.
Like,
quite the journey, kind of going from almost one side to the other of the coin for you, right? And being able to almost experience both sides of how things happen, like being somebody who's, like you said, in the wings, and then also being somebody who's handling all of those transactions, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things you learn on and you try to improve on is if you've been through the process, kind of see the good, the bad, the ugly, what you enjoyed about it, what you didn't enjoy about it. And then when you set up and you start doing it, you take your own shop and firm in place, then you want to take the best of what you've learned and put that in as your, prime directives of these are the things that we're really good at. These are KPIs. These are what we're really good at. And these are the things that we know that the clients don't like, the things that we know that are, really problematic, and they're not good for the clients. They're not good for the whole situation. So we've really tried to focus our whole offices and all of them kind of like it, and which is built around to make it really friendly for the owner operators and friendly for the buyers and sellers. I think one of the things Jim is most proud of as the founders, in 30 some years, we've never been sued, which in this business is incredible.
Wow. Okay.
Because I think all we deal with are attorneys. So, I mean, but we do that because we don't force anyone to buy or sell. We're there. I always tell my clients, like, look, when you're ready to sell, you'll know. My job isn't to tell you when to sell. It's to have that relationship so that when you're ready, you make the correct decision on who to represent you and take you to market. And that's really what we try to build is that relationship. Everything else will follow through if you have that in place.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just out of curiosity, you guys mentioned, doing mergers and acquisitions and being kind of in that middle market, I think is what you said there. Are there any specific industries that you're focusing on? Are there any that like stand out where you're like, hey, this is what we're really good at and what we love, and there's other things that we'll be a part of, but it's not exactly the bread and butter? How does that look for you guys in Gulfstream?
Yeah, so we're agnostic. Okay. So when I say that, the only thing we really won't do is we don't do a lot of C stores. We don't do grocery stores. We don't do cash businesses, generally speaking. We sold everything from groups that do avionics to make airplanes to we sold the company that did all the F-15s for all the NATO countries throughout the world. We do a lot of really interesting stuff with I'd really say manufacturing. We just sold a company that does semiconductors. We do a lot of stuff like that. We really get in the weeds with them. The one thing we know is we don't tell the companies how to run their business. We expect they know their business better than we ever could.
Sure.
But what we know is the process, and the process works the same whether it's a $100 million manufacturing company or a $4 million, public relations company. The process that we run works the same with that. So that's what we really hammer on when we bring a new company on, is that if it's interesting and we believe we can sell it, then we'll take it to market. But those are two things that we have to have in place.
So good to know that, you kind of industry agnostic, being able to kind of handle anything. Do you have any favorites that you've had in the past that you're allowed to talk about? I'm just kind of like genuinely curious. Like, are there any awesome companies that you just loved working with that you're like, this was like a crown jewel in Neil's hat?
Yeah, and I can't give the name away, but it's the semiconductor company was fantastic. Okay. And I'll tell you what, because their biggest client was like Los Alamos, so they're doing all these top-notch things, with the secret undercut, different things.
Yeah.
Half their clients were in China. Really complicated. Several owners, different life cycles of where they are in ownership. Some of them to stay, some of them to completely exit. The business was growing fantastic, so it had to be the right partnership involved with it. And it actually turned out to be the easiest transaction we've ever done. There were no hiccups from the time we had the LOI signed to the time the APA was signed and done. It literally was the smoothest transaction we've ever done. It was off and done in 6 months.
Wow.
Now, it's not the fastest one. We've actually turned one in a day, but that wasn't, that was just, we knew the buyer, we knew who it was. That was just something that doesn't happen. Now somebody will say something. But in general guidelines, it's 6 months to a year and a half to get it done. Okay. And, this one was one that was really high tech, and I'm dealing in all the meetings. These guys are all PhDs, and they're all Stanford grads, and they're speaking things that I couldn't even comprehend. I mean, it's way over my skis. but we got the transaction done very quickly. They were very happy. And yeah, so that was a really good one. So anything like that that's exciting. We love manufacturing too. Any type of manufacturing we absolutely love. So we like people that actually build stuff and make stuff. It's probably our forte.
I want to go back to kind of an earlier point that you said where, how you guys set up your entire process, let's call it, right? You set it up to be very friendly, to be very just kind of like information oriented almost, right? Where you're just kind of doing your best to inform your clients and giving them an opportunity to say, hey, we're ready to represent you, and here's why, and here's how, and all this other sort of stuff. Walk me I want to walk through that process kind of from beginning to end, from almost like a sales perspective, right? I kind of want to get into the weeds of like how all that works. So I guess the first thing is, when I think mergers and acquisitions, and this may be very much my own kind of thought process behind it, is I can see where there's a lot of potential for clients out there or businesses out there to think that an M&A company could be predatory, for lack of a better phrase, right? Could be very aggressive, can be very like, hey, when are you ready to sell? Like, are you ready to go? Like, I can make you a lot of money, or whatever the case may be, right? What's your guys' plan for avoiding that, or trying to kind of bridge that gap to get to where you are now, being more on like the friendly side?
Right. And that's a great question, observation, because I will tell you, in our industry, two of the biggest things we see is that a lot of them are predatory, where they come like, hey, sell, you need to sell now, you need to sell today. It's today. And no matter what the climate's like, no matter what the geopolitical situation of the world is, no matter how the markets are doing, that's always their thing, is you need to sell today. And then you have the other groups that come in and for a better lack of word, they just lie to the clients. So like, we have 3 buyers in place, we can sell it, I just don't believe any of that. So what we do is really an educational process. So when we first meet with our clients, the first thing we want to really do is understand their business, what their perspective is. And then one of the things that we provide for them so they can make a good choice is we give them a free opinion evaluation. And we do this so they understand where they are in the market today. Because if they know where they are today, then they can make the right decisions if they want to continue to grow it, or if they're ready to get off and exit. So we do that at no cost. It's not sugar coated. We will never ask a company what they think it's worth, because in reality, it doesn't matter what they think it's worth. Because one of the things you'll find when you deal with business owners is they either have a really high inflated opinion of what they're worth, or they will undervalue what they're worth. So what we really start out with is really, I think for us as the linchpin, is we want to make sure that they have a firm grasp and understanding of where they are today. Because if they have that, these people aren't dumb. They have enough intelligence. They've been through this world. It's my job, and again, to tell them now, my job is to say, hey, listen, this is where you are. And when you're ready, this is what would most likely be the outcome. And at that point, they have that decision to make. And it's not uncommon. A lot of our clients, I was just talking to Jim this morning. We have a large tire manufacturer we've been talking to for 4 years. And out of the blue today, I got an email from them like, hey, listen, we're ready to talk. When can we meet?
Oh, wow.
And we really believe in nurturing the relationship, providing them with the information where they can make the correct decision. So that's, if you ask me, that's how I would say that most people would tell you we're not predatory at all if they talk to us. Someone would probably tell you that we're too laid back, that we don't, push them enough.
Right.
But what we have earned over the years is if we do tell them something, they trust us and they know it to be true, which you can't buy that.
I would imagine whether you're in like M&A like you guys are, or any sort of like sales process, if you can show, a lot of caring and a lot of empathy and just kind of like a genuine interest in what the person is looking for, whether it is a solution or a tangible item or whatever it is that you're selling out there, right? That holds true in my opinion. And from what I've experienced in the past, is being able to make that sort of connection with them, and kind of show them what the process is, instead of saying like, hey, just like you said, like, hey, I've got 3 buyers for you right now, when maybe you don't, and you probably never will. That goes way longer in the long run for a client at the end of the day.
I think they gauge you and they understand you better if you come at them with the truth.
I love that.
One of the things that I find incomprehensible for me is I get these calls where it's like, hey, is Steve in? And it's one of these recording calls. And it's like, Steve there. And you're like, I know. They're like, oh, that doesn't matter. I want to talk to you anyway. And they start off with a lie. So I always figure if somebody starts with a lie, are they going to get any better?
Yep.
How is it going to improve? And is that someone that I really want to deal with?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things we really look at on that end. And believe me, after we do that value of opinion, there are a lot of clients that I see that blood vein come out of the forehead. They're just, they want to throw me out the window because I'm not going to tell them it's worth, they thought it was X. I'm like, well, it's just, if you can sell it for that and somebody that can do it for you, I would pick them because I can't.
Yeah.
And, there's some hard conversations to be had around that. But usually they'll calm back down and they respect you. And once they're ready to go, I've never heard anyone say they wish they had to went somewhere else or done something else. I've had actually guys come back who chose other groups who came back later after they didn't sell and said we should have picked it to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the key is how you handle that relationship and really being honest up front with them.
That kind of almost answers the next question, but I want to make sure that there's nothing else to kind of expand on there. Is there's probably a large emotional component to a lot of this, right? Especially if you get a business that thinks it's worth X and that may not be where you think it could land, or they think that they can get all of these different things for their business and that may not be the reality. What are those conversations like? I imagine that they're difficult, but I'm sure that you've developed a way to kind of help handle those and walk them in the right direction over your years doing this.
Right. And you have to remember, so this is very emotional anyway, because we're not selling a gadget. You're talking about if we do this, it's going to change their life completely. This is their baby. They've spent years developing it. They love this. They know it. They want to make sure it's taken care of. So those conversations, you'll see them, break down when I've seen relationships as far as deals fall apart. The biggest reason they fall apart is because of emotions. Mm-hmm. Because even, something gets involved, they can't do it. We had a company that manufactures fire equipment years and years ago. This is a great example. We had the deal sold. It was closing in 2 weeks. The purchase agreement, everything was completed. I got a call out of the blue from the seller. And he's like, I need you to come see me. I was like, okay, so I go see him. And he's like, I just can't do it. He's like, I can't do it. And literally the deal fell apart. And what saved the deal and actually became a blessing in some ways was the buyer. I told him, because he actually was looking at one other company, and I called him up after that conversation. I said, listen, things are not going the way they should be going here. If you can get the other deal, you should take it. And he said, why would you recommend I take another deal when you're not getting paid on that deal? And I said, because I want your respect, and, my integrity is not worth this commission on this deal.
Right.
I want you to know the truth on it. And you know what? Actually, I ended up selling that buyer's business. I sold his parents' businesses in Wisconsin. And he's recommended it to 3 or 4 people. And he said, you're the only one in the whole industry that I trust because I know that you're not just there for the paycheck. And it all began with that. And to wrap that story up, the reason he didn't want to sell the owner, when I talked to his CFO later, is she told me, she said, he just could not imagine that someone could grow this company and make it better than he could. His ego would just not let him let it go.
Wow.
And regretfully, it's regressed in the years since then. Family's got everything, the reasons that he had to avoid keeping it, which was to keep the family from infighting and all these things, are now all taking place because he didn't go through with it after he made that decision. So the emotions are incredible. The best thing you can do when people are emotional in this industry is just give them the facts and to let them know that it's their decision and you'll respect their decision, but these are the facts and these are what we think to be true. And then it's up to them to make that decision because you can't really make a decision for them and you can't force them. And if you do, it never works out. Mm-hmm. So you're better off just to give them that information, let them, and they'll make the right choice for them at that moment. It may not always turn out great, but at least you know that you did what you should have done. You did the correct thing for your client, which is what we try to do.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of those take us back to kind of the earlier question, right? Where if you try to start forcing your way through there, then
it doesn't work.
Yeah, credibility gets lost, trust gets lost, and that word probably kind of spreads pretty quickly.
The 2 things that never work is forcing it and doing it for the cheapest amount. If somebody tells you to do it cheaper than everybody else, you got to figure, listen, what are we getting? If they're that much lower, and if they really don't pride themselves on anything but the cost, or am I really getting a service for what I'm even paying for? Mm-hmm. So those are 2 things we look at, and I always tell people we're not the cheapest.
Yeah,
but we do like to think that we're one of the top firms in the middle market, which I think our year over year usually speaks for itself, and we are. So
Yeah.
that's how.
I'm curious about just kind of like the process of a singular deal and kind of things that go into that from your perspective, and not necessarily like tell me what steps the seller needs to walk through or the buyer needs to walk through. I'm curious about how you get to that point and what division of your time is spent on like research, what time is spent on just kind of like sales training. Like, how are you sharpening your axe, so to speak, to get to a point where you're starting a deal? Are you like keeping up with like training or doing like continuing education stuff? Like how does Neil stay on top of things in that regard?
Well, I read everything. So I mean, everything I get my hand on, I read. I read articles. I have my Google set up, my alert set up with anything that has to do with the middle market M&A.
Okay, that's smart.
I get alerts every morning, and the first thing I do is I start off by reading my alerts. After I read my Bible passage, when I go to my Lowry, I read that every morning. First thing I get up. Grateful to have my eyes open, so I always give him first.
Yep.
And then I start reading through those because it's interesting, some of the things you learn, not only positive, but you learn the negative trends that you're starting to see infiltrate the business that you're like, why would anybody bring that up? For instance, one of the big things now in lower middle market, usually not active, but the lower ones, and it still befuddles me is that anyone would do this. But I've read articles from credible magazines and credible publications with like, hey, if you want to sell your business, the perfect way to do it is the seller financing, which is basically where they come in and take a note. And I'm like, why would anybody do that if they've got a healthy business? And of all these years I've done this, I've never had a seller come back and say, man, I wished I hadn't took more money up front. Mm-hmm. Never. But you have all these things. So you read really to find out the trends are out there because you want to know really what's going on, because it can be positive and it can be negative. Like that whole seller financing thing. I mean, really, if a seller did that, he's either uneducated or has poor representation, in my opinion. Sure. They would, because they're not going to get more if they do better, but they sure would take less if they do worse. Mm-hmm. So those are the things we really do. And in the middle of it, it's really continuing education all the way through every time you do a deal, because you're going to learn things. You're going to see things from different perspectives.
Right.
Like we just closed a deal from a company out of Italy. They had shops in Italy, and when I say shops, manufacturing. They had manufacturing in Hungary. They had manufacturing in the United States. So for that deal to get done, we had to have it done exactly at the same time on all three countries. And to complicate it, one of the owners died during the process.
Oh, no.
Her children become involved. So what we learned there is how Italian law works. Mm-hmm. So in Italian law, for that to work, they have to be at an attorney's office and sign at the exact same time everything else is signed in all the other countries.
Wow.
Or it doesn't count. So you're continuously learning by doing the deals. And I think one of the other things too is we have really good attorneys that we deal with. I pick their brains a lot. I'll ask them questions. We deal with CPAs quite a bit. So when you actually meet a good one and a qualified one, you'll pick their brains, ask them questions, and you build the relationships. So everything in this industry is a continuous education as far as the deals come. You'll learn and pick up, and you'll see things that happen over and over, and then you start to understand them better. So it really is, for lack of a better word, it's one conduit to the next, and it just generally flows deal to deal.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing how, they all really flow together. There's not a whole lot of difference between $1 million deal and $100 million deal.
Right.
There's the due diligence is the same. It's just the amount.
I see this happen more with like the general sales field. But I'm curious to see if it's creeping into the M&A space. I see a lot of influencers, and I see, we talked to a couple people a couple episodes ago about bad advice. And how there's certain, like, let's call them social media influencers or video creators out there who are claiming themselves to be experts in X, Y, and Z field and basically giving away a ton of just terrible advice. Are you seeing that creep into the M&A space with like up and coming firms? Or I see you smiling, so I may have hit a chord there, but I'm sure that you're probably seeing some of that, right?
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's from other firms so much as it's other groups that are trying to get firms to join their organizations. You know what I'm talking about? Like
yeah.
we want to represent all M&A firms, put them together, and we'll help you get more education on stuff. That's where I got the seller note. And I was like, why would they be recommending a seller's note? I mean, if it was your business, would you want to write just, hey guys, says, we'll do a note and we'll get behind the bank. And if you fail, the bank will get first dibs and then we'll take second dibs. And we hope you don't. But that's and that advice came from a prominent group and we laughed when we said it. I was like, really, it just shows kind of what they're dealing with there. So yeah, you do see that. And it's usually not from the firms themselves. It's from the groups.
Yeah.
They're trying to get all the firms to join in, kind of like almost like a union almost. It's like, follow us, we'll teach you this, this, and this. And, it's kind of like I had a buddy years ago. We sold his business and he was a big IT guy.
Yeah.
And I noticed he didn't have all the license, Googled all these things behind his name. And I was like, why don't you have any of that? He's like, because people know I can do my business. I don't need all those numbers. He said, those things are for people that can't do. He said they've never done it. So they have a lot of degrees, have a lot of time to study. They don't have any time doing it.
Yeah.
So those are the things you see. But, continuing education is good. But I think it's like anything else. You have to be self-aware of what you're learning because there's a lot of bad things you can pick up. There's a lot of bad habits you can pick up. And you see that in sales all the time anyway.
Right.
But so you'll know it when you see it. But yes, it's definitely something that even in our industry that we see. And I don't think it's people being malicious.
Yeah. I
think just they have a lack of reality as far as how it really works in the real world and what the benefits would be versus, what they would be railing against. So
that's kind of what it was when we were chatting about it a couple episodes ago, is that, it was mainly on like the marketing field, but we were also seeing some of it on the sales side too, is that they were taking advice and learnings and teachings that were 10, 12 years old at this point, which is still scary for me to think that that's 10, 12 years ago is when I graduated college. And I'm like, am I that old now? But anyways, they're taking advice from that long ago and saying this is the new way to do it. And it's like, we've already tested those methods. We've tried those things. We know that the market has moved on how it's reacting to that advice. You are just using your platform or your group in this instance, right, as a sounding board to get this message out there and shove it down anyone's throat who is impressionable, I guess, at that point. And then you get one person, then it just kind of starts spreading from there, and you get all of this terrible advice, which just doesn't work in the real world, just like you said.
But fear sells. So there's two things people never want to do. Nobody ever wants to be the first one, and no one ever wants to be the last one.
Bingo.
Always want somebody to go first, and they don't want to be the last one on the boat. So, the factor of fear is a driver in a lot of ways, and it can be useful if it's used honestly and if it's used correctly. I mean, where fear comes into play, and like what we do, is when we sit down, we tell a client, look, this is about the apex of where you're going to get to, and it's taking you 30 years to get to $3 million in EBITDA. Now, how are you going to triple that? Because they'll always be like, well, we're going to double EBITDA and we'll sell it again for twice as much in 2 years. I'm like, well, the only thing I would question is, listen, it's taking you 25 years to get to here.
Yep.
How are you going to go from here to here? What's the plan? And all these years we've done it, I've only had one group that actually came through and did it and called me next year and said, hey, we hit our number. And I was like, fantastic.
Love that for you.
I wished it happened, but it does not happen often because I think most people are like this. We always overestimate our own abilities and we underestimate the hurdles that are out there. And so you see it all the time, but it's that's where I don't like to call it fear. I like to call it knowledge again, because I don't think it's fear. I think it's just a general knowledge of, you need to understand again where you are, how long it took to get there, and if you're going to get to the next mark, how are you going to do it? Because hope, as the story goes, is not a plan.
I'm curious now to kind of flip the coin a little bit. You guys are doing a lot of M&As. You're going out there, you're talking to businesses and going through that process. Do you have people that are approaching you, selling you, targeting you? How many of those conversations are you dealing with on maybe a daily basis?
It's every day I get somebody selling something. And they're either selling me on marketing, they're selling me on how to get new clients, they're selling me on how to sell more companies, they're selling me on everything.
Yep.
The biggest thing I will tell you about that, as far as when I'm receptive because I'm in sales and this is what I do for a living. Oh my gosh, each of our offices, everybody works in each offices. We're all in sales. We all do this for a living. So I'm never rude, never coarse to anyone. But the only pet peeve I have when I approach is if you get my name wrong. If I get an email, it's like, "Hey, Jeff." I'm like, well, who's Jeff? If you don't know enough about the company or who, if you can't even get my name right, it's really going to be hard for me to sell it, to buy something. I mean, people like the name. You know that, and I know that, Chris. So, but if I kept calling you Larry, you'd probably be like, what's this guy talking about? Larry, who's Larry?
I don't know who the hell Larry is, but this is weird.
So what I'll do to test them is if they send me something like that, I'll be like, hey, sounds great. By the way, who's Jeff? I'll email them back. And you know what? The ones that are courageous enough to call me back or text me back and say, hey, listen, my fault, apologies, I'll still have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
I always give everybody a chance to move forward. But it's amazing of them, really, how many of them can't really separate. They can't tell you why you would want to use them. Does that make sense? They can't tell you what the benefits are. But it's amazing how many of them never follow up. I've had a couple of really good emails over the past 5 years where I'm like, that sounds of interest. That's something I would like to explore.
Yeah.
When I've emailed them back or called them back and get zero follow-up, I'm like, I'm begging them to give them money, and they don't want my money. So that's incredulous to me, but it happens. One of the biggest deals we've done, and I asked the guy, I was like, how'd you pick us? He's like, you were literally the only one that called me back after the first round through the week.
Wow.
So I tell all my guys, I'm like, listen, you always return the call because you never know what it's going to turn out to be. So always return the call, be thoughtful enough to do that. It may be worth it. It may not. I had a call this week with a group and they're way too big for what we do. And he said, I thought we might be, but I want to talk to you. And I said, well, I appreciate it. And if I keep my ear open, I'll find somebody that can represent you. I'll absolutely let you know.
Do you have any sort of approaches, that you like when people come to you or they approach you? Obviously, they'll use the right name, right? They'll call you Neil and everything like that. But have you had any favorite approaches or just fun stories where you're like, yep, I'm going to pull the trigger on this because he did X, Y, and Z, or he or she, did X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I really like when they start off with a question. When they ask me something, I can think about it. Because I find that to be true is if you can ask a question, and it's relatable to what we're looking for or a problem we're having, and that question will get you thinking. I'm much more likely to return a call if they ask me a question versus coming in just spouting a bunch of facts on like, hey, did you know ABCD? Or, one of the things we always ask our clients is like, hey, are you getting a lot of calls from guys like us? Because they are. And you know why they're getting the calls is because the market is starving for quality businesses for sale. But most people never stopped asking that. Like, listen, are you getting a lot of calls from us? Because if they are, we know why. And if they're not, I'm kind of shocked. And I'm like, well, maybe we need to figure out why nobody's calling you. But so I really am a big fan of questions, really kind of don't make it about us, but, ask them a question, try to really find out what it is that they're either looking for or have a desire to fill. And, and hopefully that we can fill that spot if it's something we do.
I often find too, because I'm sure your email inbox is the same way, right? Where you're getting blown up daily with just, so many different emails, just kind of almost like word vomiting in a way, where it's like spilling all these facts and all that other sort of stuff. But you're exactly right. The ones that catch my attention they either have a question in the subject line or the first line, something that's very quick and easy to read on a phone, right? Where, you kind of piqued your curiosity and you're like, wait a minute, do I know the answer to this? Okay, let me read a little bit more, and then you can decide one way or another. But I think that approach is huge because it shows that whoever's approaching you has probably done enough research to warrant that question, and they're curious just to learn more about you instead of going back again to the earlier point, being like the predator and saying, hey, you need this. You have to have this right now, and here's why. And that just doesn't work anymore.
Well, the thing about it, if you think about even broad strokes, America as a country, think about this. We're really lousy at being told, all of us, at being told what to do. That's why the draft never works well in the United States. We don't want to be told that we have to go do this or that. But you know what we're really good at responding to is when we're needed and somebody needs us and someone needs us, another state, an emergency happens. We're really good about responding through that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just inherent in our DNA here is we hate to be told what to do, but we love to be asked.
Yeah.
And, and it's probably we got two girls. They respond a lot better when I ask them a question or something, how was your day? They respond a lot better. I tell them to clean the room and Lord, have mercy. It's the, clean the room.
Yeah.
I mean, so it goes from that. So, a lot of it is just how do you treat other people? How do you talk to other people? At the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Yep.
And we're all here for a short time. And it's really, if you treat everybody right, and that's one of the oldest sayings, and it's really true. It'll all come back to you if you do correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And having a little bit of concern, understanding what they're going through. And the problem with going in and saying now is this guy may have had the worst day he's ever had in his life, and his wife's been telling him all day long what he has to do. Mm-hmm. And he gets to work, it's like nobody else is going to tell me what I have to do today.
Yep.
Maybe somebody asked him, what do you want to do? What's your thought process on this? So we're really big on that. I know that if I'm being sold, I love to be asked those questions. I love that.
Yeah.
So we try to get input on both ends.
And I also can personally relate to the whole clean your room thing. Is with my oldest daughter, she's 3, but we're working on that, and working on those responses, and starting with, just like you said, is asking those questions like, hey, can you help me here, or hey, how was your day, or hey, can we talk about this and then I'll help you. Like, it's crazy how much that applies whether you're 3 or you're 33, right? There's such a huge gap there, but the principle is the same no matter where you fall in that.
So wait till they go to college. You're going to be in for a real treat then.
Oh, I don't want to. Checking my pulse. I don't want to think about that quite yet.
Really enjoy that part. Okay.
I love it. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time here, and I want to make sure that we kind of get you in and out of here like a SWAT team, and can kind of respect your time. I'm sure you got a busy day, Neil, but I do have one final question here, and I always like to ask this of all my guests is, you're somebody who's been in this space for a number of years, not just M&A, but just in the sales game, let's call it, right, for a hot minute. I'm curious, if you were to kind of give advice to somebody who's looking to get into what you do specifically in M&A, not necessarily like being a managing partner or whatever the case may be, but somebody who wants to be involved in M&A, what sort of advice would you give them, or what steps would you tell them to take in order to start kind of following, in a path that is similar to yours?
I would always tell them, when you get the opportunity to start somewhere, the whole success story begins with starting. It's that first step. It's taking that first job. And listen, you're going to be scared. There's going to be a lot of things you don't understand, and you may not have knowledge. But I would tell always, and I tell my girls this: find something you love, find something you enjoy. I love what I do. I don't know if it comes through, but I absolutely love what I do. Yeah. I wouldn't trade it for $1. And believe me, I've had jobs that I hate and miserable, and you have that feeling of dread. And I talked to a guy the other day, a good friend of mine. He said, he said, I hate being managed without fear. The fear of the loss, fear of losing your job. And that how a lot of management does it. If you don't hit this, blah, blah, blah. And he says, I just hate it. So I said, well, why don't you change something? Go do something you love. Find something you like. But the biggest step I would tell most people, if you ever get a chance to work for yourself in any capacity, whatever it may be, take the chance. It'll be something that you'll never regret, I don't believe. Because even if you go back, and you'll find out one or two things. It's either something that you're really good at and you love doing, or there are other people that, they like the structure of having a job. They like the structure of a steady check.
Sure.
They're not bent to be entrepreneurs. So know what it is that you like to do, and then pursue it. And if you love it, don't let go of it. Keep working, and eventually you'll find your way. And the other thing I'll tell you, that the biggest problem most of these kids have today, and I say that kids, I'm talking about 18 to 20 year olds. I sound really old now. These old kids come on. The biggest thing I have is they come in and they're like, they want to do what I'm doing.
Yeah. And
I'm like, listen, you have to start here. You want to get to here, you have to start here. Nobody enjoys this part, but it's important to do. And the last piece of advice I'll give you, or anybody working, is listen, know what you love, know how you do it. If you don't like hamburgers and you don't like grease, don't go to work for McDonald's.
Right.
So you got to know what you enjoy. And it takes a while. The other thing I tell you is I tell my girls, be patient. Just because you think you love something until you actually get in the weeds and do what you don't know. And it may surprise you what you're good at and what you love. So that's the key. Anybody want to get in the industry, I say it doesn't matter where you come from. You can have a fine arts and letters degree like I have.
Right.
Or you can have a degree from Wharton. And I meet a ton of those guys, and some of them, it really shocks me they got through Wharton. I'm like, well, let me explain the P&L to this guy. I barely got English today. I mean, what are we doing here?
Yep.
So, but if you find it, be willing to start on lower rungs and be willing to work your way up, and it'll be rewarding. And find yourself a good mentor. Find somebody like I was fortunate enough that gentleman I talked about earlier took enough care and me to actually train me and teach me. Now, there were some days I wanted to beat him with a stick because of the way he talked to me back in those days.
Of course.
But everything he taught me put me where I am now. Every step he put me on that put me to where I am now. So if you can find a good mentor, a good partner, like Jim Niffen is the best partner. I couldn't ask for a better partner than Jim Niffen. You know, the Lord has blessed me in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of it's just been receptive and open, know what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and then going for it. You know, sometimes you just have to take that first step and go for it.
Honestly, that's such a perfect way to kind of sign off there. And there's so many levels to that I think will hit home with everyone who's listening here, or watching, or whatever platform it is. You know, I think that really hits home for a lot of different people. So I think it's a good way to cap this discussion off. Neil, first off, thank you so much for getting a chance to sit down and have this conversation with me. I think it was super insightful, not only from the M&A specific stuff that we discussed, right, but also more of the sales side, more of the personality side, and just kind of getting a chance to go into your brain a little bit. And I'm sure that 4, 6, 12 months down the line, some of these answers may change a little bit. Some of what's going on in M&A may change a little bit. So we'll definitely have to stay connected to see if there's any crazy updates or anything that's that we want to reconnect over. But for now, I think this is great. So Neil, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate the conversation today.
Chris, I appreciate your time, and it's been enjoyable. It's been a good conversation, so I wish you the best of luck.
Shout out once again to Neil for spending some time with us on this Fireside Chat. Neil has a true passion for what he does in the M&A space to stand out, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. If you have a favorite part that you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on this chat with Neil. Be sure to like the video, consider hitting that subscribe button, and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when future chats go live on our channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy hunting.